Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D, brought to you by the OBR. Appreciate everybody, certainly, for following along every day here as the Browns 3D podcast kicks off what is the nightly lineup here now on the OBR. You're getting 2 to 3 shows every single night. And obviously, you guys are enjoying it. We can see the numbers. We can see the support you guys are all giving us. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. Make sure you're subscribing over at YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing over at Twitch. Make sure you are heading over to the OBR for all your daily written content, that you are getting some fantastic stuff. Check out the Insider Package. You will be privy to some information ahead of even the big parts of the Cleveland media. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. With the Shrine Bowl concluding last evening, the Senior Bowl will have their game on Saturday, concluding the All-Star circuit and basically the beginning of the 2025 NFL draft season. Good friend Eric Galco, congratulations on another fantastic Shrine Bowl. That game has really, really picked up as far as the level, as far as the eyes, as far as the talent level under the leadership of Eric Galco. Jim Nagy with another great week down in Mobile, Alabama. Probably talent-wise, one of the best rosters that has been put out down in Mobile, of course, from the Senior Bowl. Just an impressive group of athletes. And we're going to talk in this episode, and we're just going to stick on the offensive side here today. And of course, when we talk about these guys, we are talking about in their relation to what we think they can do for the Cleveland Browns, or where they rank in a pecking order of being potential Cleveland Browns. And unfortunately for this draft class, and when we talk about the quarterback class, I think the one thing we can maybe all agree on is none of us are sure about any of this quarterback class. I think it's the fairest and most simplest way to put it. Does that mean we're not going to banter about it? Does that mean we're not going to bust each other's chops about it? Does that mean we're not going to still plant our flag on who we think is our guy? Of course we're going to do. That's what we do every year, right? Certainly did not get to see who are to be considered the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft class to this point. Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders both were at the Shrine Bowl. Neither participated. Do not have measurements yet on either of these quarterbacks as well. If you ask me where I think the top quarterback in this class is, I personally think it's Cam Ward. Do I say it with a high degree of confidence? No. There is one issue with Cam Ward's play that's become kind of something of a red flag, and Cam Ward and Jalen Milroe are both tied for most fumbles from quarterbacks in this class with 17 apiece. As we have already learned with Jalen Milroe, his hands are less than ideal size. We do not know where Cameron Ward's hand size is just yet, but sometimes when a player does have a concern of fumbling issues, it is usually correlated to hand size. Now, put that to the fact that if you wanted to play for the Browns, they are a team playing in Northeast Ohio, playing in the AFC North, would be playing meaningful games most likely in January in Buffalo and Kansas City, and you can see how that concern could possibly grow. Now, I think Cam Ward's got a lot of talent. I truly do. I think he's got a lot of natural arm talent. I think he is able to throw from different arm angles. This year at Miami, you really saw the stepping up of players like Xavier Restrepo. You really saw a player like Elijah Arroyo, who had kind of been an anomaly down in Miami for 3 years, all of a sudden kind of find his way into what's probably going to be a top 64 pick, at worst top 75 pick in this year's draft class. That is done. And the reason that did become is playing with a player on the level of Cam Ward. Now, the turnover certainly caused you some hesitation. I agree with many of the masses who say that if we were talking about Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders in last year's draft class, ideally, we would be talking about maybe the 7th and 8th best quarterbacks in that class. Yes, last year turned out to be a dynamic class, but that doesn't mean these guys get a free pass this year because their peers aren't as good. You got to be critiqued for who you are, not who you're going up against. Now, Shador Sanders, and let's just be honest here, Shador is already and going to be the most polarizing prospect in this class. Things I think that will really work in Shador Sanders' favor. There will not be a city or a team that Shador Sanders will go to play for where I think he's going to shrink from the spotlight. Mentally, and his genetic makeup obviously tells you he is ready for whatever situation is going to come his way in April. He is the son of a Hall of Famer. He is the son of very possibly, he's certainly a Mount Rushmore cornerback in the NFL. But as far as all-time NFL personalities, Shador Sanders' father probably makes that Mount Rushmore as well. So there is nothing that is going to be too big for Shador Sanders. He has the confidence. He has some really great abilities. I say when I watch him throw the football, the goodness of it, and when it looks really great, it kind of reminds me of Drew Brees in his release. Tight spirals. Maybe they aren't as fast as throwing balls as you've seen in the history of the NFL, but tight spirals, very catchable, accurate. The things that kind of scare the daylights out of me in regards to Shador Sanders is the pocket presence and the lack of athletic ability to make up for his poor pocket presence. Shador Sanders took a lot of bad sacks, and I just can't get away, and I will continue to say this. It is extremely hard, and I understand, and I will say it again for those who do not know. In college football, your sacks count against your rushing yardage total. That being in mind, in this day and age, you should not find a collegiate quarterback the way the game is played today with negative rushing yards. That tells you that that is a big black flag and lack of what is in the overall game of Shador Sanders. He's going to need an elite offensive line. And ideally, if you're a quarterback who's getting drafted extremely high in a draft, you're probably not going to have an elite offensive line. So that is one thing that just continues to concern me. But if you want to make the case mentally, persona-wise, that Shador Sanders is ready for the NFL and whatever's going to come his way, I will not disagree with you. I like Jalen Milroe. I'm not going to lie about that. And I think a lot of people seem to think when I say I like Jalen Milroe, that means I like Jalen Milroe as as a guy to possibly be drafted by the Cleveland Browns at 2. No, I do not feel he is somebody I would draft at 2. So please just squash that thinking whatsoever. He is a guy that I think if the Browns were to trade out, if somebody else is going to come up and get Warder Sanders, the reason I will gamble maybe even a second-round pick on Jalen Milroe is because I should have myself an extra pick. At least, most likely I'm going to have 2 extra picks. Who knows if they're going to be in 25 or they're going to be in 26. So if I can add one more pick and still get a premium talent at 3, possibly 5 or 6 in this draft class, I'm probably going to take that roll of the dice. A name that's kind of been floated around a little bit, and I'll be honest, I started this week 18, Joe Milton from the New England Patriots. Well, Joe Milton was in last year's draft class. What did people say about Joe Milton? He's got an extremely strong arm, and he's got some pretty good wheels. Well, for Jalen Milroe, what I would say in comparison maybe to a guy like Joe Milton is he probably doesn't have the overall arm strength. I'm not sure anybody in the NFL does. Joe Milton's got a gun. But Jalen Milroe has a strong arm. He has a lot of technical flaws that need to be worked on. But he also has game-breaking ability with his legs, better than Joe Milton. Is he a project? He's a big project. But he's also a guy, through his time at Alabama, got both his degrees. Got his bachelor's and got his master's. So this is a young man who's not going to shrink, or is not going to walk away, or he is not going to be a guy that is home playing the latest video game instead of doing his work. Jalen Milroe is not going to shrink from a workload challenge. So that is one reason. And look, he may not hit it. He may not hit his ceiling, and that's very, very understandable. But if I can take him in the second round, ideally in the third round, I still would not have an issue with drafting a quarterback in 2026 in the first round if that's the way the cards fell. So you continue to work on the progression of a Jalen Milroe. Jackson Dart. If we're going to talk about guys with just really, really tremendous arm talent, Jackson Dart qualifies. He does. I know he's going to get a knock for playing in the Ole Miss offense. And it's really getting hard, for these kids. You can't knock these kids for what they're doing in college. It's not their offense. Ideally, they have the opportunity to jump at any time after a season to go to another school. But there's just so much movement in college football nowadays. It's extremely difficult for a kid to, say, find an offense that he can stay in for 3 years, which is just rare enough as it is, or to just find an ideal situation for a coach / system / personnel to fit just exactly what is best for a young man. But Jackson Dart's a player. He truly is. He's got some really special arm talent. And I think one of the biggest advantages Jackson Dart has is he's still just a baby at 21 years old. Normally your quarterbacks are a tad bit older. We certainly saw that with Bo Nix last season. But Jackson Dart, in my opinion, is not a bad option to have. But again, this class is a mystery, and I don't think this class is going to offer the Cleveland Browns. Look, they are desperate for the long-term answer at the quarterback position. And whether it's free agency, whether it's the possible trade market, whether it is the draft, it is almost absolutely guaranteed that the answer to the Cleveland Browns' desperation for a long-term quarterback will not be answered this offseason. So the sooner we all wrap our heads around that, the better. I know everybody wants to talk about Will Howard. There is one thing I want to say. I think a lot of people want to say, oh, well, Will Howard, Ohio, we'd love to stay here. Will Howard is from Eastern Pennsylvania. He's closer to New Jersey than he is to Ohio. So while that year was magical, and his season was, and his playoff run was, let's not talk about Will Howard like he's the hometown hero, because it's just not truly the case. His arm strength is good. It is not great. I think he, overall ability-wise, kind of got lucky. Jeremiah Smith, Mbeka, obviously Henderson, certainly Judkins. He got himself into a really great situation with some really, really talented football players. He held his own, and he got the job done, but that doesn't elevate his draft status in any way whatsoever. The 2025 NFL quarterback class, ladies and gentlemen, say it with me, it is an unknown, and it is a mystery. This running back class in 2025, I mean, I'm enjoying going through this because every guy brings something. I don't know if you guys heard, we were talking with Pete Smith yesterday. As of today, Mel Kiper has a draftable grade on 33 running backs. One for every team. Literally enough for every team to draft one running back. It's an insane number. It is a crazy number. That is a lot of running backs. Austin Genty, certainly, your best in show, as everybody believes. Everybody really, really likes Caleb Johnson. I think Caleb Johnson would fit really, really well with the Browns' wide zone system. Marion Hampton from North Carolina, special talent. I don't know if anybody heard Todd McShay talk yesterday and talking about Buckeye Travion Henderson. And what Todd said is some of the things that I have been saying about Travion Henderson. He runs low to the ground. I think he's faster than people believe he is. He is certainly somebody that is probably more advanced in the receiving game at this point of career than most guys coming into the league are. And this is exactly what Todd McShay said, and if you've been listening to me, you know, what really seems to set Travion Henderson apart from most of his peers right now is the pass blocking ability. It's the want to. There's a phrase in football. Basically, when you were in your stance and you were assigned to be a blocker, and maybe you don't have somebody to block, guess what the phrase is called? It's called looking for work. And that means I don't have anybody necessarily to block on this play, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to block anybody. And Travion Henderson will hit you, and he will light you up. Now, McShay suggested that Henderson could be somebody that could be going in the first round because of the fact he has the ability that he shouldn't have to come off the field. There's two things with that that give me a little pause and hesitation. Travion Henderson does have a injury history. Some of it he played through at Ohio State. Certainly there was some time that was missed. He's coming in right now probably at his best overall peak health of his time at Ohio State as he enters the NFL. So good for him in that regards. But the question would be, is if you were going to view Travion Henderson as one of these backs that basically takes the entire workload, a Saquon Barkley, a Derrick Henry, does that exasperate the possibility for injury? If that's the case, then drafting him that high probably doesn't do Henderson any favors and doesn't do your team any favors, because when you draft a running back that high, you have almost all of the run game invested into him. I think Henderson put in a position where he is going to be part of a rotation and even a guy that could get, 13 to 16 touches per game and certainly have him out there for third down ability because of his blocking ability serves him best and certainly serves your team best. Where I think things probably work for the Browns as far as the running back class is, Browns have 6 picks. 6 picks, and I think it's from like 196 on. And this is where this class really, really, for me, gets really, really interesting. Devin Neal from Kansas. Real low to the ground runner, quick feet, maybe quicker than he is fast, tough. You saw the day he had against the University of Colorado, a game where basically all the eyes were on the Colorado Buffaloes, and a guy like Devin Neal said, not so fast, my friend, and put on an absolute clinic against Deion Sanders' defense. Trevor Etienne. Always weird when a guy was a former Florida Gator and closed his career as a Georgia Bulldog, and that is something with the portal I will never, ever wrap my head around. Etienne was injured his year in Georgia, and he's kind of been dinged up. He's not a full-size guy by any means whatsoever. He is not going to be a full-time running back in the NFL. But for advantage here for NFL teams drafting Etienne is you are going to get him on day 3. So a guy who was once considered a day 1, day 2 talent, certainly his brother was right on the fringe of a day 1, day 2 talent back in his day with the, before he, ended up with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So certainly for Etienne, interesting name. Damian Martinez from Miami, long guy, long strider, fast guy. Everybody thought this was a guy that played around 235. He plays more at about 223, and it shows with his speed. Looks pretty good down in Mobile. Donovan Edwards from Michigan. The receiving standpoint of his game stands right out. There were people down at the Senior Bowl that said, hey, it's a weak wide receiver class. Would you maybe? No, you draft him to be a running back, and you see how it all works out from there. But a guy who I think maybe caught the NCAA 25 cover jinx, Donovan Edwards, to be available on day 3 is just a crazy, crazy thought. LaQuint Allen. And I tried to tell you guys, and, Pete Smith can try to claim LaQuint Allen all he wants, blah, 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 blah. You heard it here first, guys. I'm telling you that right now. Allen is an extremely good receiver. Has monster hands, 10 1/4 inch. Offensive lineman type hands. 2 straight 1,000 yards seasons at Syracuse. 60 receptions for 500 yards last year. This is an all-around back. And if I am building a running back room where I want contributions from everybody, a guy who had 2,000-yard seasons back-to-back, a guy that can give me 60 receptions, 500 yards, is a guy that automatically can be a part of my running back rotation and certainly can be a big part of it as well. This running back class is special. I cannot emphasize that enough. So much so that with these day 2 selections that the Cleveland Browns have, take 2. Part of the reason would be the Browns never truly, I don't want to say wanted to, but never truly saw a path where they would take a running back and give him a big money contract extension. Nick Chubb was just so talented and just so important to the team that he broke the analytic mold. And that is why the Browns, what they did with Nick Chubb. Now, as we're getting towards the latter part of Nick Chubb's time with the Cleveland Browns, you think they will probably go to what their approach was going to be. The offensive line, the wide zone system is very friendly to running backs. Therefore, we don't maybe necessarily have to pay them all that much. This wide receiver class, and the wide receiver in me, this hurts. There's no better position in the NFL. There's no better position in football than wide receiver. But the problem is, it's just not very deep. It's just not very deep class. I would not be surprised if for the fourth offseason in a row, Andrew Berry starts working the trade market for a wide receiver. You love what Jerry Jeudy did last year. But after that, you have some guys that you think have some talent, but nobody has separated themselves or nobody has proven in themselves. I will not include Elijah Moore in this just because of the fact that Elijah Moore is slated to be a free agent. But Ted McMillan is going to go off the board in the top 10. Luther Burden is probably going to go in the top 15. Matthew Golden has just risen insanely and is now most likely going to be a first-round wide receiver. Emeka Egbuka going to most likely be a first-round wide receiver. I just don't think the Browns can get a guy that's going to come in here and just all of a sudden be an upgrade over a Tillman. So that's where things get murky, certainly for Cleveland with this class. I will say Jaden Higgins had a nice run down in Mobile. Both Iowa State wide receivers did. But not enough where you can take these guys round 2 or round 3 and just think you're getting an automatic solution to the Browns wide receiver room. If you think the Browns wide receiver room is good enough, I'm sorry. You were dead flat wrong. Jerry Jeudy absolutely separated himself last year and showed everybody he was worthy of the former number 1 selection that he was. But you have to get somebody proven in there. And I do believe this is exactly why Andrew Berry has kind of been a guy that says, I'm going to trade for one, I'm going to sign one over the last few years because he's trying to hedge his bet. Because if the young guy doesn't pan out, he can cover himself with a guy who has somewhat of a proven track record within the NFL. Expect the Browns to be active in the wide receiver trade market yet again in the 2025 NFL offseason. Tight end position. Now, look, Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland, have these guys cemented themselves as first-round picks? Most likely so. Loveland basically was there to begin the season, thought of as a first-round draft choice, and I don't think he's done anything, even though Michigan had a really sour year. I don't think Loveland has done anything to lose his spot within the first round. Has Tyler Warren jumped him? That is certainly a legitimate question. Tyler Warren was one of the most dominating players in college football this year, whether it was, just as an overall receiver, whether it was, as a short yardage quarterback, whether it was the play against USC where he snapped the ball and caught the touchdown pass. Tyler Warren had a ridiculous year for Penn State. And as long as his athletic testing comes in decent, Tyler Warren probably will be, in my opinion, the highest drafted tight end in 2025. Elijah Arroyo played in anonymity, only 11 receptions his first 3 seasons down in Miami. This year, 35 receptions, almost 600 yards, 7 touchdowns. Listed on the Miami roster as 6'4", 230 pounds. Goes down to Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. Measures in at almost 6'4.5". Measures in at 251 pounds. Man size, grown man, tight end size. And guess what he did when he got down to Mobile? He dusted anybody trying to cover him. Had a phenomenal week. Here's a guy at 6'4.5", 250 pounds. His people think he might break into the 4.5s on his 40 time. Had an overall miles per hour at one point this season of 20.8 miles per hour. The thing, he's going to have to learn how to get his hand in the dirt. We'll speak on Harold Fannin next. You need Arroyo to be a hand in the dirt tight end. At 6'4", 250, you want everything. You don't want a big slot. You want to be able to say, hey, you've got to do it all because you're 6'4", 250. So that is certainly going to be a work in progress, of course, for Elijah Terror. Harold Fannin Jr., look, it's a great story. Obviously, monster season this year. Backed it up, showing those receiving skills down at the Senior Bowl as well. Thing is, ideal size for a tight end, he just does not possess. So he is going to be more of that H-back guy. If you were a team, you're going to use him a lot more like Brock Bowers. big slot, maybe even line them up outside. The testing is going to be huge for Harold Fannin Jr. because not only is he going certainly from the MAC to the NFL, there's that jump up from the MAC to the Big Ten, then from the Big Ten to the NFL. Harold Fannin, the testing will be important for a player of his caliber. I think Mason Taylor and Gunnar Helm are kind of right around the same path as Elijah Arroyo. Good receivers, good size, but you're going to have to show the NFL brass that you're not just a weapon. You're a full-time tight end. Teams thirst for the guy who can put his hand in the dirt. They know you all are athletic enough to be lined up outside, lined up in the slot. But can I get you to also play with your hand in the dirt? You can do that. That is what separates the men from the boys in the NFL. And that's how you get fringe tight ends as opposed to the Travis Kelce's of the world. You want to be that full-time guy. The offensive line class, and it's a good group. And I certainly think that they got a little bit of a tough run down at the Senior Bowl. It's a lot easier for a defensive player to rush from the left side or the right side or up the middle, this, that, or the other thing. It's a lot different for an offensive lineman to go from the left side to the right side or play the middle. It's just not as easy to do. It's not. You have to do these drills. You want to showcase everything, but it's not always the most friendly thing as far as basically accentuating positives of an offensive lineman. Kelvin Banks, Cameron Williams from Texas. When you have a question on two guys from the same team and people don't know who the best one is, usually it's neither. So maybe both of them are thought a little bit higher than they should. Will Campbell, we'll see. Everybody says he's built like a guard. We'll see if he's built like a guard. One guy I really, really like, and he was out at the Shrine Bowl, Holland Pierce out of Rutgers. Just for the craps and giggles, I want the Browns to draft him so he and DeJuan Jones can be the first two guys off the bus. And you can have 6'8" and 6'9", 370 and 375 get off the bus together. That would just be fun. A little older than the Browns like, so that's going to be an issue certainly. Gray Zabel from North Dakota State just had a phenomenal week. And, I don't know what goes on in North Dakota and South Dakota. And obviously it ain't much else but football. But what gets produced out there each and every year is just absolutely insane. These guys come out so clean, so polished each and every year. It's a pleasure to see the way the programs out there handle their talent. Talking about guards, and the one I'm going to highlight the most, Tyler Booker from Alabama is a good player. Wyatt Millen from West Virginia is a good player. The most intriguing guard to me is Ohio State guard Donovan Jackson. The reason, in my opinion, he is the most intriguing guard is because he could possibly be a left tackle. It's one thing to have to step up for your team and say the situation was Donovan Jackson, the beginning of the season, played left tackle for the first 4 games for the Ohio State Buckeyes, where the competition wasn't as tough. No. He played left tackle in the playoffs, the final 4 games, and he was clean, immaculate, squeaky clean down the stretch for this team. The reason I like Donovan Jackson so much is I already know he could be a solid guard in the NFL. But I might be able to get myself a solid left tackle and not get it in first round. Maybe mid-second, maybe late second. And I have a guy who could possibly be a starting left tackle in the NFL. What Donovan Jackson did for his program, what he did for his own draft stock closing out the season, made money. And congratulations to him. And it's going to be really fun to see the way that he is viewed down at the Senior Bowl. This class is going to be interesting. And I think this class is a really, really good class overall. I think it's going to get dinged because of the quarterbacks. It's always going to happen. It always seems that a draft class is overall viewed by what the talent is at the quarterback position. And this team, this class just doesn't have it. And look, we'll bounty about it, and we'll bicker, and there'll be Ward versus Sanders conversations and discussions and arguments. Are you on a project like Milroe? Can he reach that, or is Dart's arm strength enough? It's just going to be so tough. It really is. And what's going to have to happen? And the thing is none of this is anything anybody's going to have an answer for now. Because what's really going to be the thing, whether it is a Cam Ward, whether it's a Shedeur Sanders, whether it's a Jalen Milroe, whether it's a Jackson Dart, it's going to be where they are after 1 year in the NFL. What did they do that first year in the NFL? How much effort did they put in? Were they able to change their negatives? And I don't even want to say just the positives. Were they able to take their negatives into moderates where they can take that next step to then maybe turn them into positives? It's a lot. It's a lot to ask because these kids are so talented, but yet in many ways it feels like they are so far away from being talented, successful NFL quarterbacks. The thin line, it is thin, razor thin. And these kids all their lives have been absolute superstars at the position. And now all of a sudden, when you look at a lot of them, you feel they're about as far away as a prospect can be. It's been a great week here. Senior Bowl week, watching the practices, discussing prospects. One of my favorite weeks of the year. We'll put together another incredible lineup for you guys next week. Close out the week next week with Pete and I breaking down the Super Bowl. We'll always find some other things to chew on. We've been talking with everybody here at the OBR, inner here about, how we're covering everything's going further. And, everybody's super excited. Look, it sucks that this team is 3-14, but every one of us love roster building. Every one of us loves free agency, the draft. We're all looking forward to it greatly. And we're certainly looking forward for all of you taking this ride along with us. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR YouTube page, the OBR Twitch channel. Make sure you are checking out all the daily written content from your favorite OBR writers who put together great, great detailed work each and every day. Sign up for that insider package. And when you realize how good it is, tell your friend to sign up for that insider package. I am Jeff Lloyd, your host here at Browns 3D on the OBR, your daily delivery of all things dog pound. We will talk to you all next week.